It will never, ever in human history come down to as important a moment, Alex, and I really want to get this across to your listeners. If the state wins, if the globalists win, if the communists and the socialists win, capitalism has delivered unto them such monitoring and control and video technology that it is entirely possible we will never, ever be free again. It comes down to this. We have the technology to communicate free and peaceful and voluntary ideas across the world. They have the technology to control everything we do, to monitor everything we do. They're talking about bringing in monitoring of the internet in the UK and so on. If we lose, we may never, ever win again. There won't be some big cycle of history and your great-grandkids will be free. It comes down to now. They would use every tool in their arsenal to win, and they're trying it. We must use every legal tool in our arsenal to fight back, take no prisoners, push forward every agenda, challenge every relationship, push forward, because it's now, literally, or never, I strongly believe.
We have reached the great crossroads. Humanity is awakening. And all of you that have played your part in standing up to the censors, standing up to the bullies, and spreading the word are at the heart of this new renaissance. That's why, for myself and the entire InfoWars crew, I want to salute you all for what you've done in the information war and what you've also done on the streets peacefully. And why I'm asking you now more than ever to redouble your efforts, because victory is within sight. Well, it doesn't matter if it's the Financial Times of London, or whether it's the Washington Post, or whether it's the Economist magazine or the Harvard magazine. They all say globalism is collapsing, people are turning against it. We're not turning against internationalism or being a citizen of the world if you want to live all over the world, or working with other countries or accepting other cultures if you choose to adopt them. But we're not going to be ruled by a secret TPP ratified in secret for 10 years that our own governments couldn't see. We're not going to be ruled by carbon taxes that bureaucrats and Rothschild and Rockefellers and Soroses make money from. Story out today, future of globalism shaken up by Trump victory, nationalist political earthquakes. It doesn't mean Brexit's perfect. It doesn't mean Trumpism is perfect. It means it's about taking the power back to the people, back to the states, back to the government. Bigger politically is always worse, always more authoritarian. And STEFAN MOLYNEUX is a businessman, author, researcher, very popular radio, TV host. Really appreciate him joining us for the next 30 minutes. freedomainradio.com, STEFAN MOLYNEUX. On Twitter, Free Domain Radio, on YouTube, hundreds of millions of views, reaching tens of millions of people a week. I wanted to get him on like a week ago just about the general state of the world, what's happening, but now we have Spicer out. Spicer being out, folks, from my sources, as we told you, that signifies the populists are even stronger now. With Scaramucci coming in, they're getting ready to clean house. Trump's putting this communication guy in first with the rollout. He knows deep state's coming after him. It's on. So we'll get Molyneux's take on that. 5 more years of EU migration cabinet victory after agreeing soft landing transition period that will delay UK getting its borders back, as the EU announces 10 million Muslims have come in the last 6 years, worse than I thought. Most of them military-age men. This is the globalist takedown. Now they've announced an EU Navy, and the Italian government's blocking citizen groups just going on and showing how the Islamists come out 100 miles off the coast. They get picked up and taken to Italy, and then everything's paid for. This is a plan to force Islamify Europe. I didn't believe this 10 years ago when I heard it from people. It's really happening. It's so insane, but Peter Sutherland admits it's the plan. So we'll talk about that as well and other big subjects here with STEFAN MOLYNEUX. STEFAN, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be back.
Which one of those 2 biggies you want to tackle first?
Well, I would like to talk about the globalism thing as a whole, because I think there's this massive change that is occurring, wherein I think the Trump administration has figured out that it is not the mainstream media that is going to be setting the agenda and determining the popularity of their candidates and their sort of voter-facing people. I think that they're recognizing that the alternative media is where the real action is and where the real mind-shaping is going on, because people come to people like you and I because they get something different than the verbal diarrhea of the mainstream media. And so I think that there's a reorientation. Spicer was big on regime change in Syria. He was hammered by myself and other channels, and he's out and Scaramucci is in. Now, we'll see how he does. I certainly think he's going to be better than Spicer, but I wouldn't underestimate how much impact we're having in in reshaping this narrative and having people remember that there's something about local pride that beats this communist globalist nonsense.
And that's why they're in free fall panic when every week now we have videos with 5, 10 million viewers just on InfoWars, one video. You have videos with millions of viewers routinely, always 500,000, 600,000. You spend 20 minutes, you're done, 500,000 watch it. That's more than the average CNN show. They now realize it, though, and this week, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter all launched massive censorship and admitted they are. They said, oh, we're doing 10 times worse than last year against conservatives. But I'm not really a conservative. I'm just a common sense free market guy that doesn't want to live in North Korea.
Well, here's the thing. There is an old principle, Alex, which is that people who spend their time being ostracized, people who spend their time in the wilderness, people who are out learning to eat the stony lichen in the desert, they get stronger, leaner, and meaner. And the left has gotten very lazy because they've owned academia, they've owned the mainstream media, they've owned television, they've owned everything that you could conceive of, and they've been importing all these immigrants to reliably vote for the left, which means they've lost their edge, they've lost their strength, they've lost their charisma, they've lost their capacity to connect with the American public. And we really saw that with Hillary versus Donald Trump. And because they've gotten lazy and they've lost their charisma, they've lost their mojo, now all they can do is scream Russia over and over again and think that that somehow is going to win the American public back, when what it's doing is just driving them further and further away. As the old saying goes, let us never, ever interrupt an enemy when he's in the process of making a mistake.
That's my next question. I want to get back into globalism. Sure, there's an intellectual awakening happening, back to common sense, but they are cornered rats. So what are you concerned about? What do you think their next move will be?
Oh, yeah, well, their next move is always escalation. Their next move is always to, and you can look at this as far back as the French Revolution and so on, but their next move is always to spread lies, rumor, and slander in an attempt to discredit people who disagree with their narrative, but more importantly, to whip up frenzy, hatred, and violence against those who oppose the leftist paradigm. The left is fantastic at being the Iago-like whisperers of sinister facts to the mob, to the point where crazy elements within the mob start to play out a very violent and dangerous agenda. And we can see this happening against Trump supporters at the moment.
Sure, hashtag hunt Republicans. Hashtag hunt Republicans. And you're right, they are escalating that. So where is it going?
Well, I mean, either they're going to succeed or they're going to fail. And I'm damned if I'm going to stand by and let them succeed, because like yourself, I'm a father and I want my child to grow up with the kind of freedoms that I enjoyed, maybe even more. So we just have to stand firm, we have to be courageous, and we have to recognize that we are in a war for civilization. Nothing more, nothing less. This is the greatest battle for wordsmiths in the history of the universe. We're not at the place where it's bullets and bombs. We're at the place where it's words and ideas and arguments. So if you're good at doing that, or even if you want to become good at that, you are conscripted. Philosophy, reason, evidence want you to take your place in the front lines of the culture war. It is now or never.
I think that's the most important thing you've ever said. I mean, this is the 21st century war. This is the new kind of war. They're admitting it's a war. They're admitting it's a civil war. And there was, quote, right-wing problems decades ago, and still the establishment right-wing is just as bad as the liberals. But intellectually, the resistance is by the libertarian mind versus the statist mind. And most of the classical liberals are now libertarians, and they recognize that. But there's an accelerated dumbing down of the constituency that is pro-globalism, where I go out to these events, and it's not like a few of them look like they escaped from mental hospital. The entire whole of them are frothing, insane people out of some type of Day of the Dead movie, and I don't take pleasure in that. I am frightened by it. Who are these people?
Well, this is the constituent that has been bred to be dependent on the bloody fruits of state power. The state reaches into the pockets of the productive, as you know, keeps a good portion of proceeds for themselves, and then uses it to buy votes and dependents from now a couple of generations of people dependent on state power. So when someone comes along and says we need to limit and control and reduce the size and power of the state, people think that they're going to starve to death, that they're going to die in the gutter. They have become dependent on the state to the point they can't imagine living without state power. Now they can, and when welfare or food stamps get reduced, people just shrug and get a job. But that fear, that hump, we need to help them over that hump and help them understand how much better they'll be off without this dependence on state power, how they'll have pride and productivity and self-respect and happiness, which they're not having right now. But like every addict, if you try and take away their drug, they know in their heads they're going to be better off if it's taken away. But in their hearts and in their guts, they desperately don't want to lose it. And we just have to help them overcome that fear, overcome that hump, and sell them on the happiness they'll have when they're free for the first time in their lives.
I want to be specific as you raise the fact that you're a father, I'm a father. I'm not bashing people that don't have children. I have a lot of great friends that don't, and I understand sometimes, why they don't, or, or issues or whatever the case may be. But no one, it turns out, in the EU government has kids. I mean, it's the craziest thing I've ever seen. Almost none of the leaders do. And when you look at a group of hundreds of people and then none of them have children, you sit back and you go, wow, these are the most self-centered people. And it really is that the dichotomy is people that have a connection to everything and really think of humanity as a continuum, and people that literally are so nihilistic, all they're thinking about is themselves. And I think that's really the disconnect.
Well, you have to understand that you're part of a chain of freedom. One of the worst things to happen to modern economics was this Keynesianism idea from John Maynard Keynes, who was gay and didn't have kids. And he basically said, oh, yeah, you just got to spend your way out of recessions. Oh, and don't worry, the government will then save when there's economic growth. And of course, all that was it gave theoretical justification for the endless printing of money, the endless borrowing of money, the endless bribery of the general population. And people said, well, you're going to keep accumulating debts. They said this to Maynard Keynes. You're going to keep accumulating debts. What's going to happen in the long run? And apparently he turned and snapped back and said, in the long run, we're all dead. Well, if you have kids, that's not how you think. Because you know that your kids are going to be alive, your kids are going to have to live in the world that your ideas are creating or destroying. And so you want to fight for their freedoms. It gives you a ferocity around the encroachment of state power that I think is hard to replicate otherwise.